What's up guys, as you see I'm back on my hunter with the Star Eater scales, and that is because in my last video where I used this exotic, none of the numbers itself were technically wrong, but the way I got to the numbers definitely was wrong, and the real way this exotic works is way better than we thought. So in this video I'll be showing off exactly what that is, and what the hidden perk on this exotic is, and we'll be making a cool build to go along with it. Also, I'll link the first video about this exotic down below in the description and in the comments, because I'm not going to backtrack and go over a lot of stuff stated in that video. So if you want to know how the exotic just works in general, watch that video first, then this one. And in that video I made the case of this being one of the best PvE exotics of all time, and by the end of this video I don't think there's even a case anymore. I think it just straight up is the best PvE exotic ever in Destiny. Before we get into the video, today is the last day that my code will be 30% off for G Fuel, and it might be 30% off again later this month. I'm not quite sure yet. So if you want to order some G Fuel and want to use my code when it's 30% off, I just be safe and try to do it today, because I'm not sure if it will be back later this month or not. Anyways, let's go ahead and begin with the video. So looking at the exotic perk, it pretty much just states that it increases your super damage, and that is all it really says. But as we showed off in the last video, the tether was being increased by 60% also, so it was indirectly buffing your weapon damage too, and that was wrong. What is actually going on is when you activate your super, doesn't matter which one, with ×4 Feast of Light, you'll get a 60% buff to all of your damage, not just your super. So your super will be increased by 60, and your weapon damage will be increased by 60% also. And it's not just tether, it's just a straight up buff to your entire character. And as you see, the buff will last pretty much as long as the overshield does, around 14 seconds, which made me think, is the buff tied to the overshield? And as you know, if you take enough damage, the overshield will fall off and it'll go away, and the text on the left will disappear also. So I was thinking maybe the buff is tied to how long you have the overshield. Testing that real quick on Carl. See the damage of Scout, pop your super, you'll get the 60% buff to all damage. Then if I go and take damage and let the overshield fall off, as you see, I still have the 60% buff as long as I would before. So it doesn't seem to be tied to anything at all. It's just a 60% buff for all of your damage for 14 seconds after you activate any super with Feast of Light ×4. So now that we know it's just a buff to all of your weapon damage, I wonder if that will stack with other buffs in the game. Usually buffs do not stack with other buffs, and debuffs don't stack with other debuffs. So what we can try is Loosen Blade, which is a 35% buff, and see if that will stack with the 60% of the skills. And you see on Carl we hit for 17,811 with Lament. Then we go ahead and pop our super, get 60% more damage. It goes up to 28,000. Now we go ahead and get Loosen Blade on top of that. As you see, it goes up to 38,000, which is another 35% on top of that. So we can still reach that 209% total buff that we showed off in the previous video. But as you see, the skills is its own 60% buff that is stacking along with everything else, just like the Power of Sputum buff or even the Backers buffs. It's not really following any of the rules, it's not being treated as a buff or debuff, and will stack with whatever. So in theory, the most efficient way to use this exotic is if you're in a team where you already have someone using Weapons of Light and someone using a debuff, for example, one hunter using tether, the rest of the hunters should be on a burst DPS super, for example, Stasis, bottom tree Nighthawk, or even middle tree Blade Barrage, just to get the super damage out really quick, and then have the rest of the time to do weapon damage with that full combo. And this led me to test a few interesting combos you could pull off. The first one that came to mind was, what happens if you pop your super with the skills on, then unequip them? Well, you still have the 60% buff for the full 14 seconds. So looking at that on Carl, with this scout rifle now that usually hits 2746, now it will hit for 60% more at 4393. But now if we take off the skills, we still have the 60% buff, and we do, for the full 14 seconds as you expect. Which means in theory we could swap off to Mask of Backers on Stasis and get the 2 remaining 10% buffs in the game that stack. And what that would look like is, if you're using an arc weapon, you would throw your super at the target to slow them and freeze them, swap off to Backers, dodge, then you'll have 10% more damage because it's arc weapon, and also 10% because they're slowed or frozen. So now the entire combo, if you have Weapons of Light and a debuff on top of this, would be 273% more damage. So this is now the new highest combo you can get in the entire game, and has pretty much every single buff and debuff that can stack in the game. And you can do this with any arc weapon in the game. There's a bunch of good ones. For example, Fourth Horseman. That full combo would take the DPS to 665,000, which is quite a lot, and that might be on the low side for the first mag. It might actually be a lot higher. It's so hard to tell how much damage is being done on Carl because he just dies in like 3 shots. And you could also do this with Cloud Strike, which would be extremely strong too, but more importantly, you could do this with Anarchy plus Arc special weapons, so an Arc Sniper or First and Last Out, which would be the best combo. and that combo would probably be in like the 300k range also, and be extremely good for sustained DPS. And all these combos would be extremely strong for like team-based activities where you have one person on Weapons of Light, one hunter using Tether for a debuff. But let's say you're playing completely solo or with randoms and you didn't really have, Weapons of Light, or someone else using a debuff for you. What you could do is use Tether yourself, either top tree or bottom tree. Top tree will be better for weapon DPS, while bottom tree will be better for burst DPS from the super itself, but you'll have less time after the super is done to do damage with your weapon. So depending on which one you want, one might be better than the other. Then we're going to pair that with Deathbringer, which is the highest single weapon DPS in the game. Then we're going to use Salvo on top of that. Then finally, whatever kinetic primary of choice. I'm using the rendition from last season still. And the mods of choice will be Blast Radius to become Charge of Light with Deathbringer or Salvo. And that is from the artifact of the season, only costing 1 energy. Then we also have Argent Ordnance, which will increase the damage of our rocket launcher. Every single time we do damage with a rocket launcher, it will consume 1 stack of Charge of Light, and this mod will stack with itself up to 4 times. And usually I don't use this mod because it doesn't stack with Weapons of Light. So if you're in a Weapons of Light bubble in a team, it's pretty much useless, but like I said, this is more of a solo build. And pretty much how this works is on Carl, normally the Deathbringer hits for 22,134 per projectile once it's at max damage buff. But while you're playing and using the Salvo, you'll become Charge of Light and pick up orbs to get Feast of Light times 4. And then whenever you're ready for a boss fight, you'll tether them and you'll give yourself the entire buff and debuff combo possible. And looking at the damage increase of the Argent Ordnance with times 4, the Deathbringer will go up to roughly 29,881 per projectile, which is going to be a 35% buff, so on par with Weapons of Light. Once again, it will not stack with Weapons of Light, but it's kind of replacing it for a solo build. And now we throw in the Tether on top of that for the 30% debuff and the 60% buff from the skills with times 4 Feast of Light. As you see, it's going to go up to, just 62,151 per projectile, which means the numbers for Deathbringer will go up to 435,000 damage per shot on Carl, which means 314,000 DPS, which is obviously extremely strong. And that is not like a crazy burst number like 4th Horseman. That is going to be a number you're going to be able to hit for multiple rockets in a row. Another thing you could do with this build is you could take off one of the Argent Ordnance mods and put on Supercharge instead. That way you can shoot off 4 rockets in a row with the full buff. I think you'll lose roughly 5% of the buff not having 4 stacks. You only have 3 now, but you'll be able to get in 2 more rockets with the buff. So yeah, this exotic is just completely broken. It's just straight up 60% more damage for everything you do for 14 seconds. And you get your super extremely quick with the double super energy from orb pickup. And the solo build with Deathbringer is crazy for single target damage. I almost like 1.5 shot the strike boss with no heavyweight, which is absolutely insane. Then the stasis build is going to be a little bit better for like team-based fights, because you're going to throw your super at the target. That's going to do damage over time. Then you're going to give yourself the highest damage buff possible, as long as you have one person using Weapons of Light and another person using a debuff. And that would be really good for team-based fights. Or you could even use like middle tree solar or bottom tree solar for some quick burst damage with your super, then follow it up with whatever weapon of choice, and that would be extremely strong also. So yeah, I think that's going to be it for the video. This exotic is definitely one of the best of all time, if not the best. And yeah, like usual, let me know what you guys think about this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.